The African sun bled molten gold across the acacia-strewn horizon, spilling light into a small clearing where life and death were about to collide. A giant rock python, a living relic of raw, uncheckable predatory design, had wrapped its colossal coils around a young rhino barely old enough to wander far from its mother. The serpent's body, thick as an ancient tree root, tightened with terrifying precision, each muscle fiber an unyielding chain forged by millions of years of evolution. Dust rose like ghostly smoke in the air, stirred by the desperate thrashing of the calf's hooves, kicks that found no purchase against the crushing strength that pinned it to the earth. Tiny, high-pitched squeals, sharp as glass splinters, were strangled into silence beneath the predator's relentless grip. The python's scales shimmered in the dying light, each glint a cruel jewel reflecting the sun's beauty while concealing death's cold reality. Far from any human hand, this was the wild as it had always been, without pity, without malice, governed only by the ancient law that the strong survive and the weak become sustenance. But this moment was not entirely unobserved. In the dappled shadow of a towering acacia, a massive silverback gorilla sat perfectly still, his dark, fathomless eyes locked onto the unfolding battle. The air around him felt heavy, like the pause between two thunderclaps, his great chest rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. From his distance, he could see the young rhino's final jerks weakening, the small flame of its life flickering dangerously low. Then, without warning, the gorilla's head tilted ever so slightly, as though some invisible weight had shifted inside him. The choice he made next would ripple far beyond the clearing, changing not only the outcome of this fight but the very definition of what the wild could be: defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Only an hour earlier, this same stretch of land had been a sanctuary of calm. The air was warm, rich with the earthy perfume of red oak grass and the faint hum of unseen insects. Sunlight filtered through the feathered canopy of the acacia trees, weaving gold-laced shadows on the soft ground. In this stillness, the young rhino had wandered, clumsy in its curiosity, only a short distance from its sleeping mother. She lay in the shade, her massive sides lifting and falling with the peace of one who believed the world to be safe, that this was still their land, still their sanctuary. The calf's small ears twitched at every leaf rustle, its stubby horn catching the sunlight as it bent its head to nibble tender green shoots. High above, in the lattice of branches, life moved differently. A troop of gorillas, mothers, younglings, and one towering male went about their quiet routines. The juveniles tumbled in play, rolling through patches of light, their soft barks blending with the sigh of the wind. The mothers stripped leaves with deliberate calm, their fingers deft and gentle. And there, a little apart from the rest, the silverback sat as guardian and monarch, his sheer presence a silent fortress. His dark gaze swept the terrain not just for leopards or rival troops, but for the invisible shifts in the air that spoke of change, a skill honed by a lifetime in the wild. Hidden at the edge of all this, Ranger Ethan knelt in the undergrowth, binoculars pressed to his eyes. For weeks, he had been watching this troop for a long-term behavioral study. He knew the science that gorillas avoided conflict with other large animals, that their worlds rarely intersected with creatures like rhinos. But nature, in its infinite cruelty and beauty, was about to force an intersection that no field manual could prepare him for: the righteous care for the needs of their animals. But the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. It began with a ripple in the tall grass, silent, patient, relentless. From the shadows slid an African rock python, a living embodiment of predatory mastery, more than 15 feet of cold, coiled intent. It did not hunt from anger. It hunted because hunger was as much a part of its design as its shimmering scales. Its tongue flickered, tasting the faint, warm scent of mammal on the breeze. Its eyes, unblinking and ancient, locked onto the calf, with a focus that was absolute. Every inch forward was deliberate, each movement erasing the fragile illusion of peace. Ethan, through his lenses, spotted the predator, his breath hitched. His training told him that this was the way of the wild. The natural order? Yet his humanity stirred restlessly in his chest. The calf grazed on, oblivious, until the grass behind it moved in a flash. The strike came like a whisper of lightning. One moment the world was still, the next it was chaos. The python lunged, its mouth opening impossibly wide, its first coil, locking around the calf's midsection before the little rhino could even bleat for its mother. Another coil and another. The air split with the muffled, choking sounds of the calf's struggle, hooves scraping furrows into the dust. The peaceful clearing erupted into violent desperation. In the canopy, gorillas looked up from their feeding, curiosity flickered in their eyes, then faded. This was not their battle. They turned away, back to leaves and stems, leaving the law of survival unchallenged. But Ethan couldn't turn away. His hands trembled as he radioed for veterinary backup, his voice clipped but urgent. He knew. An hour's distance meant help would be too late. His pulse hammered in his ears as he watched what he was powerless to stop. And then, something shifted. The silverback had not turned away. His gaze had never left the scene. Slowly, deliberately, he descended from his perch, each step of his colossal frame pressing into the earth like a drumbeat of intent. He was not rushing. He was not panicked. He was coming, and his presence carried the weight of a decision that defied the cold laws of the food chain. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The moment the silverback began to move, the clearing seemed to hold its breath. His head was low, eyes locked with unwavering precision on the predator. Each step was slow, deliberate, the kind of movement that doesn't waste a single drop of energy but carries the weight of unspoken authority. The python, sensing an incoming force unlike any it had encountered before, reacted instantly. Its head rose in a fluid, almost regal motion, the sunlight glancing off scales patterned like burnished armor. The body beneath those coils only tightened further around the helpless young rhino, drawing from its victim's small, fading breath every last drop of fight. A long, loud hiss escaped the serpent, not the frantic protest of prey, but the cool, steady warning of a killer defending its claim. And yet, in that hiss was a challenge. Inches from the rhino's wide, panic-flooded eyes, the python's fangs glistened like polished ivory blades. The gorilla did not break stride. From deep within his massive chest came a low, guttural growl, so deep it seemed to seep through the very soil beneath their feet. It was the kind of sound that bypassed the ears entirely and resonated in the bones, not merely a threat, but a promise. Ethan, frozen behind his binoculars, could feel it in his own chest. If you had been in his place, you would have felt the air between them vibrate, an invisible rope pulling the scene taut. Courage, Ethan realized in that moment, wasn't the absence of fear, it was this, advancing toward danger with nothing but intent in your heart. The silverback's growl faded, replaced by a breathtaking transformation. Rising up from all fours, he stood at his full height, his silhouette framed by the blaze of afternoon sun filtering through the canopy. In that stance he seemed less animal and more elemental, a living monument to raw power and defiance. Then he drew in a deep breath, and his cupped hands pounded his chest. Boom, boom, boom. Not hollow thuds, but rolling thunderclaps that tore through the clearing, each one an ancient drumbeat declaring war. Before the final echo could die, he charged. The earth shook beneath his strides, 2, then 3, and he was upon them. His massive hands shot forward, gripping the python just behind its head. The leathery pads of his fingers clamping down with the kind of force that could split branches like twigs. He roared, a sound so primal it seemed to peel the bark from the acacia trunks, and began to pull. The clearing erupted into chaos. Python coils thrashing, dust exploding upward, and the young rhino's limp form shuddering in the sudden shift of pressure. This was no clean battle. The python's advantage lay in its unyielding constriction, a force that did not tire or reason, only tightened. The gorilla's strength was explosive, muscle surging with each wrench and pull. For one terrifying heartbeat, Ethan thought the silverback was losing ground, his arms straining, his stance slipping under the serpent's whirlwind force. And then Ethan realized something far worse. The rhino's body had gone still. Time was running out. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Ethan's rifle was already in his hands, but his training screamed at him that this was the worst possible shot. One wrong squeeze of the trigger, and the bullet could strike the gorilla or the calf. He was caught in an impossible triangle: predator, protector, and victim, and the only thing more dangerous than inaction was action without thought. His pulse hammered, his breath came shallow. Then, in a moment of razor clarity, he knew the only choice. Abandoning protocol, he shifted his stance, shouldered the rifle, and aimed not at life but above it. His sights found the canopy, and he squeezed the trigger. The gunshot ripped through the African air like a tear in the fabric of the world. It was alien here, unnatural, a sound that didn't belong to wind, water, or wildlife. Even the leaves seemed to pause mid-rustle. The python, startled beyond instinct, recoiled in a single convulsive wave. It did not think. It simply acted, and in that action it abandoned its meal. Coils loosened like unraveling ropes, falling away from both rhino and gorilla. Before the silverback could crush its spine, the serpent's body melted back into the tall grass, its patterned scales flickering in and out of sight like a shadow fleeing the sun. In seconds, it was gone. Silence poured into the clearing again, thick and almost too heavy to bear. The silverback stood, his great chest heaving, his gaze fixed on the point where the snake had vanished. Ethan's arms dropped, the rifle lowering slowly as though weighted with lead. His own heart slammed against his ribs, every beat echoing. The gunshot still ringing in his ears. Was it the right choice? Some part of him wondered, but another part knew the calf was breathing, and that meant the choice had been enough. Yet what followed would etch itself into Ethan's memory far deeper than any shot ever could. The gorilla did not vanish into the trees. He did not retreat with the victory of a warrior or the indifference of a survivor. Instead, he stayed. He stood there not as a combatant, but as something far rarer in the wild, a sentinel. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Ethan emerged from the undergrowth slowly, his movements deliberate, knowing full well that any sudden shift could turn this into a different kind of confrontation. The silverback's eyes found his immediately. There was no fear there, no aggression, only a steady, measuring calm, like the gaze of an elder weighing the worth of another soul. Ethan's boots crunched softly over the trampled grass as he approached the small, crumpled body of the rhino calf. Dropping to one knee, he pressed his hands gently along its ribcage. His fingers found the soft give of broken bone, multiple ribs, maybe more, but then, beneath that damage, a faint, stubborn rise and fall of breath. Broken ribs, he murmured into his radio, his voice thick with both urgency and relief. But it's breathing. I need that Vetivac now. Subject alive but critical. The words were clinical, but the wave that swept through him was not. It was the knowledge that in this place where nature so often takes without remorse, life had been handed back, if only for now. The gorilla remained a few yards away, his massive form still and open, not blocking, not threatening. His chest no longer heaved with the effort of battle. His hands, moments ago locked in deadly force, now hung loosely at his sides. There was something in the way he stood, steady, grounded, that made Ethan's throat tighten. This was no accident, this was no fluke of overlapping instincts. This was choice. A choice to remain, to guard what he had freed until another could take over. No roar, no chest beating. Just presence. Sometimes, Ethan thought, the truest form of courage is not in the fight, but in the quiet that follows it. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Then, as Ethan's heartbeat finally began to slow, the most astonishing moment of the day unfolded, and it was not the roar, nor the charge, nor the victory. It was this. The silverback, his vast frame now a calm shadow against the swaying grass, took one deliberate step forward. His every movement carried the weight of decision, the quiet authority of a creature who could bend the world with force but chose restraint instead. Slowly, almost ceremonially, he extended one great arm. His hand, a hand that could splinter branches with a casual squeeze, descended toward the young rhino's side. And then, with the back of his knuckles, he touched it. Not a prod. Not a test. A touch so impossibly gentle it seemed to defy the physical reality of his size. It was an anchor in the storm, a silent reassurance that the calf was not alone. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was not instinctive curiosity. This was something else, something deeper. In that instant, the line between species, between predator and prey, between us and them, it all blurred. The distant rumble of an engine broke the trance. The veterinary team's vehicle rolled into the clearing, tires crunching over earth, still marked by the thrash of battle. The silverback straightened, his dark eyes following the newcomers. As the team rushed to the calf, working with swift, practiced efficiency, stabilizing it, lifting it gently onto a stretcher, the gorilla stepped back. Not vanishing into the trees, but retreating to a respectful distance, as though acknowledging that his role in this story was complete. He watched in silence, his gaze following the small, battered form until it disappeared into the back of the truck. There was no final display, no lingering for applause. Only quiet departure, his massive figure melting into the dappled shadows of the forest, leaving behind a space that somehow felt emptier for his absence. Against all odds, the calf survived. Weeks in the rehabilitation center became months of recovery. Every breath it drew was a testament to a chain of unlikely choices, a man-breaking protocol, a gorilla defying the simple laws of self-interest, a team arriving just in time. When the day finally came to return it to the wild, it stepped into the grasslands not as a victim, but as a survivor. News of the encounter spread through the conservation world like wildfire. Conference halls buzzed. Campfires burned low into the night as rangers, scientists, and trackers traded theories. Was the silverback simply protecting his territory from a dangerous predator? Or had Ethan witnessed something far rarer, a deliberate act of interspecies empathy? The question refused to settle. To Ethan and to all who heard the story, it became a mirror held up to the human heart. If a creature of the wild, bound by no human law, no moral code, could extend mercy beyond the limits of its own kind, what excuse did we have for doing less? It was a reminder that the animal kingdom is not a cold, mechanical struggle for survival, but a living web of choices, instincts, and moments that defy explanation. A reminder that compassion is not ours alone. It lives in places we rarely think to look, bridging the space between any two living beings. The next time you hear the call of the wild, remember this silverback, not for his power, but for his touch. No matter how heavy the storm or how long the night, remember, you were built to endure, to rise, and to shine. The same fire that tested you will become the light that guides others. Stand tall, your story isn't over, it's just beginning.